Welcome to People Unplugged, the podcast from the creative team at People Unboxed. I'm Westy, Digital Director at People Unboxed. This is the People Unplugged podcast. Well, good afternoon, everybody. This month, I'm really pleased to say I'm joined by Andrea Pacini, and great to have you on the show. Andrea is founder of Ideas on Stage. So Ideas on Stage offer coaching for public speaking, media training, stage presence, impactful delivery, I hope. And he's here to help. His aim, I think, and Andrea will take you through this, his aim is to help people become more credible, confident, and hopefully convincing presenters, which I'm sure we can all aspire to be. So firstly, good afternoon, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good, Westy. Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And I'm looking to learn loads, which I'm hopefully the listeners are too. So it's absolutely great to have you on there. That was a bit of a headline introduction, and I'm sure I've missed a load out. So perhaps I'll throw the ball over to you, and you can take us through the journey you've been on to get to where you are today, and then we'll dig into how we can help these people become more confident and credible.
Sure, happy to do that. And just to correct something, if you don't mind, Westy, because I need to do this for my colleagues. So you said founder of Ideas on Stage. So technically, not really. I'm the head of Ideas on Stage UK. So I look after activities in the UK. But it's not just me. We have colleagues in other countries as well. We are a small company. But anyway.
No, thank you. Where's the company based then?
So yeah, we have a presence in the UK. I'm in London. We are in London, but we are also in France, in Paris, in Milan, in Italy, and in Barcelona, Spain.
Oh, fantastic!
But
Lovely.
We are in total less than 10 people, spread across different countries. So that's how we work.
Well, tell me how you've got there to be the one who's lucky enough to be working in London rather than Barcelona then, if that's even, and I wouldn't count that as luck.
Yeah, so the reason why, so I'm a presentation coach, as you mentioned, and the reason why I'm so passionate about public speaking is because when I was a little kid growing up in Italy, I grew up in a family of very small business owners. My parents have always run their own very small business together. They still do. And so as a kid, I saw their challenges because raising 4 kids while trying to run a business is not easy. But I also saw their spark and entrepreneurial mindset and proactive approach to life. And so that's why I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, to run my own thing. Now, in reality, that remained a dream for a long time because before doing what I do now, I tried many things, Westy, many projects, all of them failed. But it was useful because in that process, what I realized was that there are so many great ideas that fail, not because of the ideas themselves, but just because of the way they are presented.
Yep. Okay.
And that's why then, to cut it short, eventually I became a presentation coach. That's why our mission is to stop great ideas from failing just because of the way they are presented. That's it.
I love that. And do you know what? I'm going to put you on the spot. And for people listening, and this is literally the first time Andrea and I spoke to each other. And as you know, for the regular listeners, I love to do it this way because I like to learn I'm asking the same questions as hopefully the listeners have got. I don't know if you're a fan of Dragon's Den, and there was, and I'd be shocked if you weren't. Last week's Dragon's Den at time of recording, there were 2, possibly the best presentation I've seen on it, and possibly the worst presentation I've seen on there as well. And you know what? It's really interesting because what I remember from it was the presentations. I couldn't tell you what the products were, which is really strange, right? So and one of them they invested in, and one of them they didn't, and I think there's something in what you're saying there, that it's not the idea necessarily that's bad. If you can't put it across and you can't see what that's going to do to help someone or, how it's solving a problem they've got. So there is the problem. I'd love to know how we do that. Before we do that, can I take it back a step? Because when we talk about public speaking, I think, and I'm a presenter, there's nothing that fills people with dread more than having to present or speak publicly. And for some people, that fear might even be having to give a one-to-one update to their boss, or even taking a call from a client. They've got that anxiety of what to do. What is that? What's stopping people doing that?
That comes from like physiological reasons. Our brain finds it very hard to distinguish between, for if you think about our evolution as a species, our brain finds it very hard to distinguish between a tiger attacking us and a group of people looking at us when we speak in public. And you say, as you said, Westy, I say public speaking, but public speaking doesn't have to be a big talk at a big conference. It could be a one-to-one conversation at work, and there are ways to, I wouldn't say overcome the nerves,
Yeah,
because the nerves will always be there. I'm a presentation coach. I'm also a presenter. I do that all the time, but I always feel nervous before presenting. So it's not about overcoming the nerves. It's about finding strategies that allows us to channel the nerves in a more positive way. For example, you can you can make sure that you've got always some water with you to avoid a dry mouth. You can make sure that before your presentation, if you can move a little bit, that's great. When we need to present, we have a lot of energy in excess flowing through our body, and we want to take some of the energy out. And one way to do that is to move rather than waiting for your turn while being seated. You can do some breathing exercises. For example, before a presentation, what I do is just for a few seconds, I breathe in through my nose and I count to 3, and then I breathe out slowly through my mouth and I count to 6. And when you breathe out, if you make that longer than when you breathe in, that helps you calm down. You can include, for example, a moment of interaction with the audience right from the start. That puts the focus away from you and back to the audience. So there are practical things we can do. However, none of these things will help unless we rehearse.
right.
Many
Okay.
people don't rehearse. And rehearsing means repeating your presentation out loud several times. And then let me just mention one final thought, which is this. I interviewed Alexandra Galvez for our podcast, the Ideas on Stage podcast, some time ago. And she told me that, so she's very famous on LinkedIn. She writes about authenticity. People know her for the hashtag authentic Alex. And at the beginning of her career, she told me that she was very, very scared of speaking in public. And at some point, she had an opportunity to choose between two roles for her next move. One role did not require her to speak in public, one role did. And she chose, now she was very afraid of speaking in
Yeah.
public. Despite that, she chose the role that required her to do that often. And here is the idea is that, again, it's not about overcoming the nerves, but it's about doing it anyway despite the nerves. And if we make that decision consciously a number of times, then with time, with practice, we can get to a point where it's going to be easier for us to channel the nerves in a positive way.
And do you think that's easier if, in her case, she made that decision? In other cases, people maybe are promoted to a certain level, and it's okay. Now you're going to go and present this, and if that person's made that conscious decision themselves to think, no, actually, I need to overcome this. I need to practice it. Do they tend to find it easier than people that are almost forced into that position?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that. What I can say is that regardless of whether or not it's you or whether it comes to you because of your circumstances, then anyway, practice is always useful. Of course, maybe it's a bit like therapy. If you are the one who chooses to do therapy, then
Sure.
it will
Yeah,
work
and that's what
much
I'm
better.
thinking. You've almost already got that sort of upper. You've already got that will to want to do it. And
Yeah.
when there are going to, it's like anything, isn't it? It's interesting when you know that you were saying about other business opportunities in the past, and I'm a big believer of they're not failing. Then maybe this just not the right decision yet. You know, it may be the right decision at another time, or maybe if situations change. But the one thing you are doing is learning from those. Every time you do that, you're learning and thinking, do it differently. Think,
There's a
what have I learned from that?
yeah.
And I think it's important to look at that as, rather than me being a failure, the situation wasn't right at the time. Do you know what I mean? Taking away from the personal side of things.
Yeah, there's a. I'm a football fan, and I follow the you know, I'm from Italy. I follow the Serie A league, and there's an
You're
Italian
a Milan
coach.
fan, aren't you? I can tell.
I'm a Juventus fan.
Oh, yeah. Do you know what? It was a 50-50. What was I going to do?
Yeah.
I should have seen with you. You got the black t-shirt and the white microphone. It's going to be Juventus, right? It's Juve all the way.
Of course. And there's an Italian coach, not from Juventus, and he said something a couple of years ago that stuck with me. And he's not the first one who said that thing, but I remember he said, "When we lose, we never lose. We either win or we learn."
Yeah.
And we can apply the same approach everywhere, including in business, including when in everyday's activities. And Westy, going back to your previous question, the reason why practice is so important is because when we think about public speaking, this is a skill like many other skills, but it's a skill that requires knowledge and technique. It's a bit like learning how to play a new musical instrument or learning how to play a new sport. We need knowledge, we need to know the rules of the game, but we also need technique. And every time you have a skill that requires that has that combination, knowledge and technique, what really makes a difference is practice.
That's fascinating, because I think there's, and I'm 100% behind what you're saying here, because would I have chosen back in the day to be a presenter or a, my presentation is slightly different. Maybe I'm standing in front of a group of 60 managers and I'm delivering a first-time manager session, whatever it may be. But firstly, I'm going to back up exactly what you said, which is, if people saying, well, it's all right for you because you're a presenter, you don't get nervous. That is absolutely not true. I absolutely do. But I think what I have done is learn how to manage it. So that's the first thing. I'm never going to, and you know what, in some ways, Andrea, I'd worry if I didn't get nervous, because I think me getting nervous, I turn it around and I think, why am I nervous? What am I actually nervous about? I'm nervous because maybe I'm not going to make a difference to them. I'm nervous because I want them to go away with more knowledge than they had. I want their job to be easier tomorrow because of something I've told them. So I'm not nervous because I'm going to forget my lines, because I don't really have lines as such. I'm not nervous that, if the PowerPoint goes down, but that's okay because I can use a flip chart. Those aren't the things I'm nervous about as such. It's more, I want to make a difference. So in some ways, I'd say those nerves is me showing that I actually care about it. I want it to be right. But I 100% agree. It's about me managing how I do that. And the breathing thing, I absolutely do that. The other thing that I was told back in the day was 5 to 1. So I should be doing 5 times as much practice for the length of the presentation, which people say, oh, don't be ridiculous. And you think, well, if you're given an hour-long presentation, I guarantee you spent more than five hours prepping that. You must have done.
Yeah, I agree. And in my experience, Westy, with the clients, it takes, for most people, it takes about 10 rehearsals for them to be able to internalize their message. And that's where we need to get to. It's not about memorizing your content, but you do need to internalize it. Internalizing your content means owning your content, knowing exactly what you want to say. Of course, if you are more of an improviser, that's fine. Every time you rehearse, you can give me the same message in a different way by using different words, different sentences, because we are not memorizing, but we do need to internalize. And the very minimum for most people is 3 rehearsals. So I recommend that everybody rehearses their presentations at the very, very least 3 times. For most people, we do need to get to about 10 times, 10 rehearsals for us to be able to own our content.
And take me through how that that looks. So let's say it's you, and I'd love to. You're the best person to take me through how this works. So let's say you're doing a presentation on a topic that you are aware of, but maybe you're not an expert on yet. And let's say you've got that presentation, a half-hour presentation, and you're doing that in 3 weeks' time. How do you approach that? What do those rehearsals look like? Are you reading from a script at first, and then you're boiling that down? Take me through how that process works.
Sure. So first of all, now the rehearsal is only the last bit. It's not.
Yes.
So we need to go through a step-by-step process now. And also, if I'm asked to present on a topic where I'm not an expert, then most likely I'm not going to give the presentation. So I need to be an expert, or at least I need to have a very good
fair
understanding of
it. All right. Well, let's say you've got you've got to give a presentation on I don't know, Juventus in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Right. So here is the process. First of all, the very first thing I do, and that's what we do when we work with a client, we need to analyze the audience. Most people start their preparation process by opening up PowerPoint or any other presentation.
Yes,
so it doesn't make any difference. And they just put together some slides, some bullet points. No, we need to start with the audience. We need to ask ourselves, or the organizers, depending on what the context is, some questions about, we call it the ABC of preparation: audience, burning needs, context. Some questions about the audience: who are they, their burning needs, what do they really need, what do they expect from, in this case, from my presentation, and then the context. For example, is it one-to-one? Is it one-to-many? If it's one-to-many, how many? Is it in person? Is it online? All these kind of contextual things. So that's the foundation of the presentation process, understanding the audience.
By the way, I'm going to cut in. I love the fact that you said don't open PowerPoint at this point. The amount of times people will just fire that off and start writing all this stuff down. And I guess that what you've just said there is such obvious, logical, slap my head. Why don't people do this? Because otherwise I'm writing a presentation for me, right, as opposed to the people I'm delivering it to.
I'll give you an example, Westy. One of our clients, her name is Marie. Marie is an executive. She's an expert in leadership. And she was invited by an association in Finland to give a talk about leadership. And she was super excited. It was one of her first international speaking opportunities. And so she prepared really well. She knew her message. She told us that she had prepared 50 beautiful slides. And also she practiced properly. So she was ready to go. She flew to Finland the day before the conference, then arrived there on the day, half an hour before the audience, because she wanted to make sure that she had time to set things up. And then when she was about to connect her laptop to the screen, she realized that there was no screen. So a little bit of panic, she went and asked the organizers, assuming that they would say, "Oh, sorry, Marie, now we're going to
we'll sort it out for you. Yeah,
the screen for you." But instead, what they did was they started laughing. And so she says, "Why are you laughing?" And they say, "Look, Marie, you want to show 50 slides, but actually you've been invited to give a talk to the association in Finland of blind people."
Oh.
Blind people. Now, Westy, I know it's an extreme example. It sounds like a bad joke, but
it's a lovely analogy. Yeah.
Marie was very well prepared, apart from one thing. She didn't know the audience. She didn't even take the time to translate the name of the association from Finnish to French, and she would have realized that perhaps there was no need to have 50 beautiful slides. So the lesson for us is that you mentioned before, the risk is that I create a presentation, but I do it for me. Exactly. That's what many people do, whether they are aware or not. If we don't know who the audience is, what they need, then maybe we create a fantastic presentation, but for the wrong audience.
Yeah.
And that's the first step. Then happy to continue with the process, but I don't want to...
Please. Yeah. So I don't want you to give away your crown jewels, but at the same time...
No. Happy Happy to share everything. So the second step is we need to make sure that we have a clear objective in mind, because if we don't have a clear objective, we are not going to achieve it. And what we need to understand is that the objective of a presentation, and I'm talking about oral presentations, not like written documents.
Yes.
When you are there presenting, the objective is not just to share some information. Presentations are very bad at informing people, because if we look at how our brain works, we forget most of what we hear within just a few seconds. So in a presentation, if you want to inform the audience, that's fine, but there is no need to give a presentation. Give them a document, give them a coffee, give them some time so that they can drink their coffee, read your document, and then you have a chart, you answer the questions. It's much more effective. Presentations are great for transforming your audience. You want to change something, either in what they know, what they believe, what they feel. What do you want your audience to do after your presentation? That's your objective. So you need to I would spend at least a couple of minutes thinking about, okay, what do I want to achieve? What do I want my audience to do?
Am I trying to change opinions on something? Am I trying to get them to buy into something? Am I trying to, that makes good sense.
Then I do a bit of a brainstorming session, which could take half an hour, a couple of hours, a brainstorming session for me to identify my key messages. And the way I go about brainstorming is I ask myself, and again, we do the same with a client, 3 questions. What do you want your audience to know after your presentation? And then you come up with a few ideas. What do you want your audience to believe or to feel after your presentation? And you come up with a few ideas. What do you want your audience to do after your presentation, connected to your objective? So if for each of these 3-4 questions you come up with, say, 3 to 5 ideas, so the answers to these questions will define the content of your presentation. Of course, this is just the initial brainstorming, that you also want to bring those ideas to life. So then you want to ask yourself, okay, I've got these ideas. That's what I want to communicate. This is what they need to know. This is what they need to believe and feel, etc. Let's bring them to life. And to do that, we can ask ourselves, okay, is there a story we can tell to illustrate that particular point? Can we include an example? Are there any analogies that we can use to explain that particular context? So that's what I mean by brainstorming. After that,
is there an ideal number of those? Because what I'm saying is, if there was lots and lots of things you want to achieve, it can all become a bit messy. So would you try and say, but what are the 3 key messages?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the next step, because when it comes to brainstorming, the objective is quantity of ideas, not quality. So the more ideas you have, the better. This is not the stage where you need to.
We're not analysing at this point. We're just gathering information, pretty much.
Exactly. Then you're right. Then we need to translate all of these ideas into a clear and engaging structure, storyline for the audience. And what I mean by storyline is, at the beginning, you need to be able to grab the audience's attention. There are ways to do that. Then you want to communicate ideally, I agree with you, your 3 key messages. The rule of 3. 3 is the most powerful number in communication. In short-term memory, all of us, we find it very hard to remember more than roughly 3 things, 3 chunks of information. So in most presentations, yes, we can communicate 3 key messages, no more. Of course, depending on how much time we have. So you said you gave me a scenario with half an hour.
Half an hour, yeah.
If I have 30 minutes, then yes, then we can think about some supporting points for each of the 3 key messages. But we have 3 key messages. And then all the way to the end of your presentation, you want to be able to remind the audience of what the key message is, remind them about why this is important to them, and again, what do you want them to do afterwards. So we go from brainstorming to creating a clear and engaging storyline. After that, either it's then time to rehearse, and I would block. So for example, if I've got a presentation that I need to give, you said in 3 weeks from now, then I would try and block my diary for So I need to be ready with the content. I like to be ready at the very least 10 days before the presentation. The content has to be finalized, so that I've got roughly 10 days where every day I would block an hour of my time to rehearse for that particular
And what are you
presentation.
actually doing at that stage? And what I mean by that is, are you working on, I'm just going to do these 2 slides today, or do you run through the whole thing, or are you almost reading it to internalize it, as you talked about earlier, and then as that process goes forward, you're then, well, I know this, and almost cutting your. I'm assuming you. Maybe I shouldn't assume this. I'm assuming you're not going to work with a script. You're not going to stand on stage and read it first and foremost, but you must get to the point where you've almost just got bullet points, right? Because you know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah. And now the very first rehearsal, and this is what works for me. It's not that it's the same, it's the only approach, but for me, the first rehearsal is me. If I've got slides, then yes, I've got slides on my screen, and then maybe I have a piece of paper with something that is close to a script, not word for word, but it includes more content than
Like
just
an
a few
outline,
talking
but it's
points.
also got
Yeah, and this is the very first rehearsal. So I've got the slides in front of me, and I've got a piece of paper, and I need to read it a little bit.
yeah.
And then the more rehearsals you give, the easier it is to move away from a script. And yes, what I do is exactly what you said. Then eventually I get to a point where rather than having a script, then I just have a few talking points for each of the key messages I want to get across. And for me, because this is key, Westy, many people think they are rehearsing. What they're doing instead is either they're not doing it at all, or they are practicing, which is different. Rehearsing and practicing are two different things. Now, practicing means thinking about what to say. Or maybe if you've got some slides, for example, you open up your PowerPoint and you say, okay, here on this slide, I need to talk about this. Here, I need to talk about that. And then as you do, maybe you realize that you need to change something. So you go back and change it. That's okay. That's a practice session. That's useful, but it's not enough. When I say rehearsing, rehearsing means repeating your presentation out loud, not in your head,
Yes.
out loud from the very beginning to the very end without stopping, as if there is a real
An
audience in
audience
front
in
of you.
front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that great presenters do is they try as much as possible to rehearse in the real world, like in an environment, physical environment, if possible. Sometimes it's not, so at least a mental environment, which is as close as possible to the actual environment you have on the day. Which means, for example, that if you know you're going to give an in-person presentation and you know that you will be standing, don't rehearse at home while being seated. Stand up, because that's the dynamic that you will face in the presentation. Or vice versa. If it's an online presentation, okay, what tool are you going to use? Are you going to do it on Zoom, on Teams? Okay, open up your Zoom, open up your slides, make sure that you've got the setup that you will have on the day, and
Yeah.
go through your presentation. That's what I mean by rehearsing in the real world.
I love that, because I guess most people would do the practice bit. You're right, but really, what they're doing at that stage is almost, from what you've said, you haven't really finalised what you're going to present yet, have you? You're sort of practicing it and going, "Oh, I might say this, or this might change." But that's beneficial. I get that, but the actual standing there and rehearsing it over, and I guess what you're doing is making it muscle memory. I mean, the only thing, and you may well be coming to this, I'm sure you are. Everything you've rehearsed so far, and everything you've written so far, um, you can rehearse that, but what you can't rehearse is answering the questions people might have, right? So, and I think for a lot of presenters, I'm not going to say they're not they're not worried about the bit that worries them most is, well, what if they ask me something I don't know, or how am I going to handle that, or I might look the most professional person on stage, but someone asks me something, and all of a sudden I'm going to fall apart because I don't know. So I'd love to know your take on that, and how can we prepare for that, because we can't really rehearse for it because we're not really going to ask. Or I'm thinking out loud as I'm talking to you now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in some ways, I guess if you consider what questions they might have, maybe you should put that in the presentation in the first place. I don't know how it works.
You can, Of course, yeah, yes, we can, not in the same way, but we can prepare for questions as well. If you give a presentation on any topic, it's because in most cases either somebody asked you to do that or you need to do it. You know what you're talking about, so
Yeah.
you know not just those 30 minutes that you've prepared or those 10 or 20 minutes that you've prepared, but you know the topic. So then you can and you should ask yourself, okay, beyond what I'm going to cover here, what could be some potential questions from the audience? Sometimes, again, it depends on the context, but maybe you have questions that you've been asked in the past, if this is a presentation that you've given in the past, or maybe you've got questions from clients when you have conversations with them on this particular topic. So you can certainly, and you should, think about potential questions. And then whether you want to rehearse your answers or not, it very much depends on what approach works for you, but you should at the very least think about potential questions. And I also want to, oh, yes, because you said, what if, and you're right, many people worry, what if they ask me a question and I don't have an answer to that
Yes.
question? If you don't have an answer to a question, you just say, I don't know. People are afraid of doing that. I don't know is a sign of confidence. I don't know is a sign of confidence because rather than what many people do instead is they try and come up with something anyway. They try and come up
I'm
with an answer.
cringing because do you know what? The worst thing that can happen, or sorry, I was going to say the worst thing can happen, but or maybe it's the best thing that can happen, is that someone in that room will know that they're making up the answer and won't say anything, but you know that they're going to tell everyone, well, I didn't like his answer. That was right. So any credibility you've built up has gone, right. And I love that take on saying I don't know, because that makes you look human and it makes you look like, I guess it's more what you do with the answer that you didn't know, or the question that they've asked you that you didn't know afterwards.
Yeah, a couple of things there. One is you say I don't know, but of course what you want to do is you want to try and find an answer, not there, not on the spot,
No.
but you can say to that person, look, I don't have an answer, but I would be very happy. I'm going to do some research. And then again, depending on the context, if you know the person, or if you don't know them, if you can get their contact details, I'll get back to you and I'll give you the answer. And if you do that, most people don't do, if you do that, you will stand out
Yes.
just because of this particular thing. And then the other thing is, so this is one element. And then the reason why I say that I don't know is a sign of confidence is also because then when you do have an answer to a question, then because you've said I don't know to another question, they will listen to you because the audience will appreciate the fact that if you don't have an answer, you'll tell them, I don't know. I'm not going to try to come up with something. If I tell you something, it's because I
It's
know.
because I know. Yeah, yeah, you're credible. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Because they can't expect you to know everything about everything, right? So no, yeah. So when in our scenario, when would you stop rehearsing? Would you be rehearsing the night before, burning a midnight oil at 10 o'clock at night, thinking, well, "Blimey, I'm on tomorrow morning," or because you should know by then, right?
So again, I can tell you what I like to do. It doesn't mean that it's the only
No,
approach.
no, no.
I like to rehearse until the day before. So one final rehearsal the day before. If I have a presentation, maybe at an event, which is, say, for example, now we are recording, today is Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say that the presentation is tomorrow morning, then yeah, today I would stop. If it's tomorrow evening, Friday evening, then maybe, why not? I could also do a rehearsal Friday
Friday
morning.
morning.
But that's just personal preference. What matters is that two things. One is that we rehearse several times. As we said earlier, for most people, I recommend about 10 times. And also, it's the most important thing is that we spread out the rehearsals over a number of days. So the fact that I said 10 times doesn't mean that if you do 10 rehearsals on one day and that's it, and that could be the day before, you're not going to internalize your message.
No. Yeah.
You need to do one rehearsal every day for 10 days.
Yeah. It's really fascinating, and you and I haven't had a conversation about what we do as a company, but one of the big things, and it's so close, it's fascinating. One of the products that we have is a space repetition tool to help. So let's imagine, I'm not going to bore you with all the L&D stuff, but someone's gone through a learning program, and then to your point, the second they walk out of there, they're going to start forgetting. So we have an app, and what that does is, okay, for the next 3 weeks, though, we're going to remind you of this every day, and you're going to do 2 to 5 minutes every day of not, and it's a bit like riding a bike, So what that's doing is that's embedding that, so that because really, at the end of what you want at the end of those 2 weeks is someone to actually get it and know it and just be able to do it and understand. So it feels very close to what you're saying, that the approach we take in L&D, where it's called space repetition, where we repeat things at regular intervals, just as someone's about to forget. Just try it again, and it's there in your mind. And even if it's not instant recall, it's there somewhere, and over time it does become instant recall. So it's very, very similar. So and that's
Westy,
fascinating.
Westy, great approach. I love the idea of space repetition, and you made me think of something else around repetition. It's not the same thing, but if we think about repetition in general in communication, repetition is good in communication. Even when you give a presentation, you should repeat your key points a few times. If you have a key point that you want to get across, you want your audience to remember that thing. If you tell your audience once, most likely they'll forget it. If you have, say, a 20-minute presentation, half an hour, if you tell your audience, of course, not 100 times, but if you tell them 2 or 3 times, that's good repetition, as long as you communicate the same message, but in different ways. So if you tell me exactly the same thing, using exactly the same words, same sentences, that's boring, because they'll say, okay, Westy, you told me. But if you tell me the same message using different words, different sentences,
analogy,
that's
different
good
story,
repetition.
maybe. Yeah. And again, you know what? It was interesting, and this is for the audience, so they know. And Andrea and I had a very quick chat via email before he came on, saying, "Just letting you know, I'm not in the L&D field as such." And I'm so pleased that you've come on to talk to us, because in learning and development, one of the approaches we take is, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So that, and that could be across a program of a week-long course or whatever it may be. But you're right. It's here's what you need to know. Now let me tell you. Here's why that's important to you. So you're right. It is that repetition bit. If people, I'm looking at, if people want to get into this, I've had a very quick look on the stuff that you've sent me over, and I looked at the website, and you've got this lovely presenter scorecard, which grades people on, I think it's simple, clear, original, related, I'm going to say, and don't tell me, because I did enjoyable. There you go. You're impressed, right? I've been practicing. What's the idea of the scorecard, Andrea? How does that work?
Yeah, so the scorecard, and thank you for mentioning it, the Confident Presenter Scorecard, people can Google it, or the URL is our website, which is ideasonstage.com/score, like when you score.
I'll put that in the show notes as well for people. That'll make it a bit easier. That's cool. Yep.
Thank you. And it's an online tool that people can use to very quickly assess their current presentation skills against the principles of a method. So when we work with our clients, we have a method that we call presentation score, because you need to score when you give a presentation, like in football. And score stands for the principles that you mentioned: simple, clear, original, related, which means related, relevant to the audience, and enjoyable. So in less than 3 minutes, and it's a free tool, it's a self-assessment exercise against your ability to meet these 5 key principles for powerful presentations. Once you've done that, you just need to answer a few questions, yes and no, and then you'll get a score from 0 to 100%. The scorecard will tell you what the score means for you, and then it also identifies opportunities for improvement. And when you take the scorecard, you also get instant access to at least the PDF version of my book, Confident Presenter, which is a book on public speaking, presenting.
Lovely. Okay. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show notes, and hopefully people will come and have a go at that. Talking of that sort of measurement and wanting to improve, and once you've given this presentation about Juventus for this half hour long that you're doing for me in 2 weeks' time, how do you know how well it's gone? Can you? I guess you can gauge some of that from the audience whilst they're there. But what do you do to then improve that for next time for you?
So there are a couple of things to consider. One, which is the most important one, it goes back to, remember, one of the very first things we need to do in preparation for a presentation is to set ourselves an objective. And often the objective is the answer to the question, what do you want your audience to do as a result of your presentation? So then if you have that's another benefit of having a clear objective in mind, then it becomes very easy or relatively easy to understand whether or not that presentation was successful. So if you want your audience, for example, to express, so I'd say it's a group presentation, maybe you are, depending on what your context is, you want the audience to express an interest in a follow-up conversation with you to discuss that particular thing in more detail. Then if people express an interest, that means that the presentation has been successful. If not, then perhaps something has not worked. So it very much depends on what's your objective. Are you clear about what you want the audience to do as a result of your presentation? And then has that happened? If so, great. If not, then we go back and try and improve for the next time.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it so far. However, for regular listeners, they know what's coming now. I'm going to go a little bit more personal questions, if that's okay, and ask you I'll pick your brains on some broader topics. So the first one that we always throw at our guests, and this one's on a plate for you because I know you've got a podcast. So perhaps you could recommend, I was going to say recommend a book or a podcast. You've got both of them, so that's easy for you. But if it was somebody else's book, or someone wants to dig in more about powerful presentations and making an impact, and how do you stay up to date? What podcast do you listen to? What books would you recommend?
Yeah, so no, I'm not going to mention our resources. So
I will. I'll put those in the show notes for you. There you go.
Thank you. So it's hard to mention one thing or one book only, for example, but I can give you a few authors, like great authors. One is Gar Reynolds. Gar Reynolds is the author of Presentation Zen and a few other books. Fantastic book. Another great author in this space is Nancy Duarte. Again, she wrote books like Resonate, Slideology, Data Story. Great author. Another one is Carmine Gallo. Carmine Gallo, one of the best communication coaches in the world. He wrote back in the day The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs and The Storyteller's Secret, and Talk Like TED, which is a famous book. And then there are books like Made to Stick by the Heath brothers, Chip and Dan Heath. Made to Stick is a fantastic book. It's how to make your idea stick in the minds of your audiences. There's also, maybe that's the last one I gave you, a book by Dr. John Medina, Brain Rules, which covers many, like 12 brain rules, but there is one chapter on communication, on what science tells us about what works and what doesn't work when we communicate our ideas. So I hope that helps.
No, I love that. Yeah, especially looking for that one chapter. I'm going to throw in another one now. Is Steve Jobs a good presenter? Was Steve Jobs a good presenter, in your opinion? he breaks so many rules. He walks around so much. He clicks here and there and everywhere. He doesn't the eye contact. He held an audience, but is that just the Steve Jobs way? I don't know.
I think that yes, I think that in his way he was a fantastic presenter. If we think about business presenters, and although when we Steve Jobs was so big that what I see is that some people want to be like Steve Jobs when presenting, and you don't have to be like Steve Jobs. You don't have to be anyone else. You want to be yourself. At the same time, I also think, Westy, that, and this may sound counterintuitive, we can talk about it if you're interested, but I don't think that we need to be authentic when presenting. There's a chapter in my book where I say, like, don't be authentic. And again, I can explain, but at the same time,
I'm going to have to pick you up there then, because you just said be yourself, which is what I thought, but at the same time, don't be authentic. What does that mean? Don't be too honest.
No. So to clarify, here is what I mean. Now, when we work with a client, this comes from our own experience. We invite people, we encourage people to apply certain principles, certain strategies, techniques, both from a content perspective, from a delivery perspective, for example, including storytelling analogies, including the right mix of logic and emotion in your presentations, from a delivery perspective, thinking about eye contact, gestures, body language, all these kind of things. And sometimes people resist that and they say, oh, you know what, Andrea, that doesn't feel authentic. It's not me. I'm not going to do that. And that's why I think you don't have to be authentic, if that's what we mean by authenticity. Now, for example, if you want to learn to play the piano and your teacher tells you, Westy, you need to sit up straight, you need to use your fingers in a certain way, would you tell her, no, I'm not going to do this, or tell him, no, because it doesn't feel authentic? And no, you would just shut up and do what the teacher tells you, because it's not about being authentic. It's not about being what feels right to you. It's about, you said at the very beginning, Westy, you want to make an impact with your
Yes.
presentations,
Yes.
with your communication. It's about making an impact. It's about doing things that work. If you think secretly that your friend's new baby is ugly, would you tell them because you want to be authentic and I want to be myself,
limit, right? Yeah.
and I want to tell you the truth? No, you would just say that the baby is beautiful. So I'm saying this because there are situations in everyday life where we choose not to be authentic, and it's good to do that.
Yes. Okay.
So of course, again, going back to Steve Jobs, you don't have to be Steve Jobs. Yes, you want to be yourself, but you need to work towards becoming the best version of yourself. And that can be, yes, the best authentic version of yourself. So that's what I mean by don't be authentic.
I love that, and it's made that really cleared that up nicely. Thank you. My final question before I let you do your plug. What's the ultimate weekend look like for Andrea?
So, do you want to know my ultimate weekend before my son and after my son? Because I have a 16-month-old son. Everything changed. My weekends have changed.
Well, I've got a 17-year-old and a I've got to check, she said her birthday, 17-year-old and a 19-year-old daughter, and trust me, it doesn't change that much. So if you think this is going to change over the next 3 or 4 years, I'm sorry, my friend, you're very wrong. But anyway, go on. So let's say you've got, let's do both. So you with your son, and then you've got babysitters.
Yeah. So no, well, I can tell you that for me, the ultimate weekend is a combination of reading. I love reading, especially books, physical books. Exercise, which is something I try and do every day, even if it's just a 15-minute run. And then I have a passion, if you want, for craft beer.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
nothing to do with work, of course.
No.
So craft beer made by local breweries in small batches, high quality. Nothing to do with the typical beer that you have
No,
in many
hazy
pubs.
IPAs, that sort of stuff. You into a double
Yeah,
IPA? You into
yeah,
a sour maybe?
hazy sour also. Hazy pale ale tends to be my favorite,
Yeah.
and so that means a combination of reading, exercise, and then a bit of beer tasting. Why not?
Oh, that
Now,
sounds great.
that was my ultimate weekend before my son. Now
And
it's
now
very
you're going
hard
to
to
say that
do
it's
all of these
exactly the
things.
same, but there's more beer, right?
No, it's very hard to do all of these things.
No, no, that's great. I tell you what, we need to sort out a proper catch up, because if we're locally, there's a couple of really nice craft beer. I'll say venues, but the real sort of try a third of this, try a third of that, and we'll sit and chat. We'll do that one day. So yeah, that'd be great.
I'd love that.
Yeah, that'd be really, really cool. Thank you so much. And you know, I knew time was going to fly, but I could just sit and chat to you for hours. If people want to learn more about the work that you do, how's the best way to contact you?
Couple of things. One is the only social media platform I use is LinkedIn. I have, and we have a presence elsewhere, but the main one is where I actually monitor is LinkedIn, so people can find me there with my name. Our website is ideasonstage.com, and that's it. And then going back to what we mentioned earlier, the best thing for people to do if they're interested in this area is to start by doing a self-assessment of where they are, and that helps them understand where they need to go, and that's with a confident presenter scorecard.
Love that. Thank you so much. Andrea, thanks so much for your time. Absolute pleasure. I'll catch you shortly.
Thank you, Westy.
Well, that's a wrap for another show. If you've enjoyed the chat today, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your shows. If you want to find out more about how People Unboxed is helping learners stop forgetting, check out our AI-powered bite-sized micro-learning app, BentoBot, at bentobot.com. Until next time, take care of yourselves.